fascists know how to use affect. And they know how to use the psyche. And that's why we also need to know, because there's no neutral space. It's That's what I mean by contested space. If their project of intrusion is a political one, ours has to be as well. And it's every day committing to not siding with colonialism, not siding with the mechanics of it, not siding with what it means, not siding with what conscriptions, the identifications it pulls us into. And I don't pretend to say this is easy or I have the answers of how to do it, but we have refusals and provocations and examples, and to rally that does create the possibility.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rania Khalek, and this is Dispatches. As Israel's genocide in Gaza continues, and as Lebanon faces ongoing Israeli aggression, political paralysis, and immense pressure to capitulate, many people are grappling not only with fear and grief, but with a deeper sense of hopelessness. How do systems of domination shape people psychologically? And how do oppressed people resist political despair while living through extraordinary violence? And what does psychic militancy and revolutionary optimism look like in the face of it all? These are questions that feel especially urgent right now, and they're central to the work of psychoanalyst and author Lara Sheehi. She's also research fellow at the University of South Africa, host of the Psychic Militancy podcast, and author of the book From the Clinic to the Streets: Psychoanalysis for Revolutionary Futures, just published by Pluto Press. And she joins me today. But before we jump into it, this is just part of this episode. The full interview is available to Breakthrough News members only. You can become a member at patreon.com/breakthrough news. And as always, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell so you get a notification whenever we post new content. And smash that like button and share this episode. It helps boost us in the algorithm that hates us. And if you appreciate the show, you can also donate below on YouTube. Lara Sheehi, welcome back to Breakthrough News. It's so good to see you.
Thank you for having me. It feels like just last week we were talking.
Because we were. And if anybody didn't see that episode, they need to go check it out. You host a show called Psychic Militancy. Yes. And we had a really awesome conversation a few weeks ago. I had the honor of being a guest on your show. And we went all in against the Lebanese government. So go listen to it there, folks. And we're going to do some of that here today. But I'm always excited to talk to you, but I feel like you are releasing a book that by the time this episode goes out will officially be available for purchase, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And it's called Psychoanalysis it's called From the Clinic to the Streets, or Clinic to the Streets, Psychoanalysis for Revolutionary Futures. Forgive me and my lack of articulation today. I'm still jet lagged. That's my excuse. For a whole week, I get to be jet lagged. Like Clinic to the Streets, Psychoanalysis for Revolutionary Futures. And I got a chance to peruse through, and I'm so excited to sit down and really thoroughly read it, because it's kind of the perfect book for the moment. Because you talk a lot about, obviously, the psychological warfare and the hopelessness that our enemies want us to be existing in, that leads to the sense of defeat. And I feel like we're all struggling with that right now, given everything happening around us. So I kind of want to get into the nitty gritty of some of that, because I think it's really, really important subject matter. So people recognize that we're all feeling a certain way, but it's also by design.
Yes.
And we can't really, we can't give into it, or else, they win.
Yep.
So, but before we get to sort of that aspect of it, because there's this major thread running through your work, this relationship between psychology and political struggle, specifically the fact that you reference Fanon a lot. And right now his work is incredibly relevant. His work is always relevant, but right now especially. So I'm curious if you could maybe tell us, what is it about this political moment, from Gaza to Lebanon to the broader rise of fascism? We could even throw in Venezuela, Cuba, just everything that sucks right now.
Yeah.
What is it about this political moment do you think that makes Fanon so important to revisit, which you do so much of in your work?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, he was a revolutionary. He was a Black revolutionary that was also a clinician, and he made no, he was upfront about this. He was just like, my work cannot be separate. My clinical work cannot be separate from the work that I do as a revolutionary in my commitments to liberation. And for him, of course, it was the Algerian liberation movement, right? And I think that's really important. That's not just like a placeholder. Fanon was somebody who lived his politics, and he lived his politics in every part of his life. And he was somebody who was committed to alleviating the psychic suffering of people. And to do that, he was just like, how do we do this? How do we imagine we do this if we're not looking at the larger structures that create this? And in his context, he was talking about colonialism, but he was talking about racism. And we can extend that and say racial capitalism and imperialism and all the ways that all the systems that by design intend to intrude upon us, curate our lives, make certain that we feel certain ways about ourselves, about the world, about relationships, and about our future, and about the certainty of whether or not we can create a world that is not reliant on the domination, extraction, and exploitation of peoples that are the most vulnerable among us. And so for me, that's really important. And the other thing is his unbending commitments to his politics. Anyone who's read Fanon knows that I always get the sense when I read him that he's like not taking a breath. And he's just like, I will continue to tell you this truth because number one, I need to keep doing it at this level and with this intensity. But also number two, because he I think, intuited and recognized that the ferocity of violent systems are ones that are meant to sort of take over and be the only reference point you have. And so his commitment to truth telling was always, how I understand it, was a way to bring us back to material reality and be like, you think this is the story, but let me tell you actually what it is. You think this is individually your failure, but let me tell you what's really at play. You think that these are the only possibilities towards liberation because your oppressors tell you that. And there are very real actual consequences to you resisting, but let me tell you what the truth is and what possibilities we can make despite this, right? And that's why he talks about decolonization, of course. So at the most simple level, which is like not simple at all, it's actually quite profound and moving. That's why I think he's so relevant.
And like everything you're saying is basically this real deep understanding that, colonialism, imperialism, it's not just about, military domination or land theft. It's also this psychological war.
Yes. Yes.
And it really attempts to, reshape how people see themselves, how we see each other, even what we believe is politically possible, right?
Yes. Yes.
So how do you see that playing out today? Because we're living that right now in such an extreme way.
Yeah, I see that. I mean, you said it up front, right? You were like, we feel despairing. And I'm not saying that these affect states are not natural within us. We all feel feelings. I'm not saying every feeling you have is a feeling that is implanted by power. Like that would be too crude and too simple. What I am saying though is that the part that becomes missing and that we miss a tune away from is that because affects are actually a natural part of our life, we come through processes of intrusion by these systems to forget that they can be mobilized inside of us towards certain ends. We also forget that our psyche is contested space. This is like what the large part of the book is about is, I walk through what psychic intrusions are, and then I talk about psychic militancy. And at the most simple level, psychic militancy is about always being aware that our psyche is being intruded upon and targeted, not as a byproduct. You're not under the boot of systems of violence and then symptomatically we just by accident start feeling afraid or confused or feel like we're crazy or feel like we're despairing. To the contrary, those affect states that might be natural there's systems are predatory on them. This is what I talk about, like a predatory psychic grammar that is used and mobilized towards certain ends. And the ends that I'm talking about in this case, which is why I always say this is a book for comrades and people who are fighting. It's because the more you fight, the more likely you're going to get targeted in this way. It's to make you disconnect and let go of and derail your commitments to what is possible. And it's done in a variety of ways. If you're despairing, you've bought the lie that your oppressors have won already. There's no reason to fight anymore. Everything's going to be what it is. There is no future possibility. It locks you into a place rather than always thinking every moment has possibilities. Now, this is why resistance is so important. And the type of resistance we're seeing, it precisely flies in the face of this. It flies in the face of it because under the most extreme conditions that we are told there are no possibilities, people are creating possibilities, whether that's what you and I talked about on my show about, what we're seeing with the Hezb, with the fiber optic resistance, or what we saw in Tawafan al-Aqsa. These are, if I want to think structurally and then move down, these are conditions that we were told are impossible. We were told that the oppressor has control of everything, that there's no movement, that they know everything because of a surveillance state. And I'm not saying that's not true in terms of how, equipped they are. What I'm saying is that what we have learned is that despite conditions that look like they're on lockdown, people always find ways to resist and maneuver and create possibilities otherwise. And create possibilities otherwise because their commitment is to life and to not succumbing to the belief that this is the only version of life there is, that the only version of life is being under the boot of the most violent people, systems, and states that would have us just completely give up, right? And we've seen this, by the way, right? These op-eds, like, just commit suicide. They're telling us what they want us to do.
Just leave your land and don't come back.
National suicide.
Stop fighting. Stop fighting. It's futile. Exactly. No, I think that sense of trying to instill a sense of futility.
Yes.
Is a very real thing. And it seems somewhat cyclical too, right? It's there are moments in time when it kind of feels like nobody's resisting, but there's always people trying to resist, but they have their cycles of ups and downs.
Yeah.
And right now maybe a down in some ways, especially in the US. And I don't want to go too much into focusing on the US, but you can think about the fact that 2 years ago, there was so much activism against the genocide in Gaza, in the streets, activism across college campuses. And then there was such a backlash to it and a counter revolution to it, to crush it and to scare people and to deport people and to detain people. And, now there's this war on Iran where the vast majority of the population of the US is against it. Overwhelmingly before it started, during, now, nobody supports this war except for the sort of hardcore Republicans who will just support whatever Trump does. And despite that lack of support and the fact that gas prices are going up and prices of everything is going up, I'm kind of wow, people aren't really pushing back in the streets right now. And I feel like it's a part of that feeling of hopelessness, futility. Sure. They're kind of flooding the zone with shit, as Steve Bannon. Wow, I'm mixing up my fascists. As Stephen Miller says, flooding the zone with shit, to try to that's what fascists do, right? It went from Minneapolis and shooting people in the streets to the war in Iran. They kidnapped Maduro. It's every other week it's something insane and people are just disoriented.
Yes.
And that's a part of that psychological warfare, no?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And listen, it's not to downplay the fact that those things are actually happening. They are. And I think we need to retain our ability to remain focused on what's materially in front of us. And we don't get anywhere by downplaying that. However, this is the other part of it. Is you're right. There isn't a mass, anti-war movement in the streets. But I think one of the things, this is, I think, the more important thing to me about psychic militancy is that is true. And also, by that being true, what we are pulled into is to completely vacate all the things that are actually happening that are very important to set us up. Like you said, it ebbs and flows, to set up the moment in which after Tawafan al-Aqsa, when this sort of mass movement comes into place, it's after years and years and years of also not seeing a movement, but there was shit that was happening and building up towards that was just as important, if not more, so that people could seize the moment, just like we saw in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, for people to seize the moment, or when we see in No Dapple or any one of these things, it's like keep our eyes on that. Is the story we're told about how mass movements happen is one that's also saturated by the fantasies of power that tell you every moment in which this direct, massive action is not happening is a failure. That's actually not true. What is it that's being happened? And at the same time, what are the things we might be missing? For example, there's a lot of community work happening right now in the context of the settler colony of the United States against ICE death squads. That is happening. There are not only communal patrols to make sure people are safe, not only did they actually kick ICE out of Minneapolis, that actually happened, right? But also like healthcare workers sort of rethinking the ways that they do healthcare because they don't want their patients to be kidnapped from hospitals. We are meant to overlook those things and to say, this is the only proof that action is happening. Now, I'm not saying that that escalation, that we don't need to be planning around certain things or bringing the entire world to a halt, right? But again, like you said, you don't want to overfocus on the United States. We can see, people sabotaging Elbit systems in certain places. There are people imprisoned because they have done things. And part of flooding the zone is also making sure that we don't hold on to those things. It's also making sure that we forget those things. It's also making sure that it's only in this very, narrow framework that we're looking at what is the shit that's happening. The thing that I always say is part of psychic militancy is saying, actually, it's an affirmation of truth telling, again, back to Fanon, that the global majority is on our side.
Yes.
It is. It is. And that is huge. Like, we cannot underplay this. And those of us who've been in this fight for a long time, particularly around Palestine, that even 5 years ago would have been a harder statement to say. But that is the truth now.
Yeah, no, that is huge. That shouldn't be underplayed. Like the level of opinion shift in a very short amount of time. And again, I sound like all I care about is the US. I promise I don't. But the shocking nature of the US public opinion shifting so dramatically in favor of Palestine. Like, we've never seen that before. It's always been such a massive struggle just to get some people, because we're flooded with a tsunami of disinformation that supports Zionism.
Yes.
And it's like, in spite of that, public opinion has shifted because of Israel's level of brutality. And that's something I do want to actually ask you about too, because, Israel's this disgusting fascist settler colony with a society that is literally orgasming off of genocide. I mean, I saw this photo that I forgot was real and I forgot even existed a month ago. Someone posted it on X and it was a photo of an Israeli soldier literally jerking off, watching Gaza get bombed. And I was like, oh my God, I totally forgot that happened. Yeah. And that's the perfect encapsulation of what that society is. And so there's an aspect of the disgusting nature of how they treat Arabs in general, that they're taking pleasure in it. Yes. But there's also a method to that. There's a method to that because it's meant to, be a spectacle. It's meant to humiliate. It's meant to socially ostracize. That public celebration of violence is it's meant to normalize that in our minds. It's an attack on us too.
Yes. Yes.
And I wanted to ask you about the purpose of that psychologically, because I think that often gets left out of how we see a society like Israelis. Yes, they're fascist, and there's elements of that exists also across the West. But there is a method to their violence that is meant to attack all of us. I mean, particularly Palestinians, but all of us.
Yes. Yeah, of course. I mean, I think there are many different reasons for it and let's say intentions. Fascists work with spectacle. this is the part why it's so important for me, and it felt so urgent to write this book and sort of like detail every little thing I have learned over the 15 plus years I'm like this is about making this available to everybody and moving it beyond. That's why it's called From the Clinic to the Streets. Like, I have no interest in keeping this behind a clinic wall, because we need this in the streets, this knowledge of how it works. Fascists know how to use affect. And they know how to use the psyche. And that's why we also need to know, because there's no neutral space. It's contest. That's what I mean by contested space. Contested space also means, oh shit, this is not a foregone conclusion. We can't just cede our psychic space and give it up to fascists. And if we think about Zionism or imperialism as an expansionist project, it cannot fully do its job without theft of the psychic terrain as well. And that is really important to me. I'm like, hey, folks, we need to know this. There's a reason, by the way, political prisoners, militants, all of this, they know, they've always talked about this, the psyche being the space of a very important target. Again, not a byproduct, not a secondary thing, but as a primary tool. So I think that's part to your question, right? It's like, how do we start to think about it? Is what's the purpose? Spectacle. It is meant to work on our emotions. It's meant to make us feel small. It's meant to make us feel humiliated. It's meant to shock and awe, where we're just like, oh shit. The thing that's really important for me too is it's meant to dislodge us from a historical arc and sort of story where this has always been present. Right? We don't need to look at the settler colony of the Zionist entity to know that sexual humiliation and abuse has been part of the settler regime, whether that's in Turtle Island or in Palestine. This is not a new story. Using instruments to rape prisoners is not a new story. What it is that there's room for it to be articulated without the blackmail that it used to involve, particularly when it had to do with Zionism. But every story of colonialism and settler colonialism has to do with mobilizing violence at all levels, and at all levels of humiliation that are meant to dismember the fabric of society in a very specific way, right? And sexual humiliation and violation is a centerpiece of this. It's also one way to say, I own all of you. I'm here jerking off over this. I own you. And actually the sadistic pleasure is part of that, because you're meant to be horrified by that, and you should be. But like this, again, is not a new story. I mean, we saw this in Iraq with Abu Ghraib. Yes. But our ability to cordon off these things as though they exist only in these spaces, like it happens in Abu Ghraib. And I'm not saying we do this consciously. I'm saying this is actually part of the overload that you were talking about, but also getting distracted by other things, deflections, the exploitation of our own good faith, our belief in liberal humanist values, every valve of society and normative social order is one way that distracts us from this, so that it feels like a new story every single time. My entreaty to all of us is, what would it be like to be militant? And this is the psychic militancy piece, in telling the story of power and colonialism from its inception, as always involving this, not as a way to like demoralize us, but as a way to know that if we know these truths, we're actually better equipped to fight all the ways in which they mean to intrude on us seamlessly and make us forget. They make us forget that this has always been the story.
Well, they literally erase history. Like, that's a huge part of it too. I mean, whether you can even just look at like examples right now, like all of these attempts that everybody laughs at, like, Trump like wants some street to be named again after some like Civil War era plantation owner because wokeness. It's like, okay, yeah, but also that's about erasing history. That is so that we don't know what happened, how it happened, and how it was defeated. And I mean, Israel's entire existence, settler colonies' existence, is about erasing Native history, whether it's like bulldozing the land, getting rid of the people so they can build on top of it so you can never remember and never come back. But actually, people do remember.
Yes, exactly.
And they will always keep coming back. But no, it's important to recognize that, because especially with, I'm glad you brought up the sexual violence, which I wanted to ask you about, and you already addressed it, but I think the way and you're right, it's not done intentionally, but the way that it's being covered, it is very much like, yes, it should be shocking and disgusting. Absolutely. Yeah. And there is a certain pleasure Israelis are taking in it because they're like a sick society, but there's also a reason for it, like the domination aspect of the humiliation aspect, the attempt to actually break people. Yes. This is meant to break people culturally, mentally, in addition to physically. And they've been doing it. I mean, this is definitely more out in the open. It's maybe more organized. But, you know, just look at the story of Rasmia Odeh, somebody who was, a pillar of the Arab American community in Chicago and was stripped of her American citizenship and is eventually deported after the Zionists came after her years ago and were like, this woman lied on her application and never said that she spent time in prison. Yeah, she actually did spend time in prison, where the Israelis raped her to force a confession. So that is something that they've been doing since the beginning. Yes. It's something that the Americans did, the British and the French did all across North America, all across Australia. You can go on and on
are
and
still
on.
Doing with Indigenous women in both in the settler colony of Canada and the settler colony of the United States. There's missing and disappeared Indigenous women every single day. What do we imagine is happening?
Yes. Yeah. And in addition to, and I like the way you put it, you said it's to remind you that we own you.
Yes.
Like there's a domineering aspect of it as well. There are reasons for all of this. It's not just all in a vacuum and the Israelis are the first ones to do it.
Yes.
And it's really upsetting, but it's also, like you said, you have to recognize this to understand that because it's happened before, it hasn't actually succeeded in the past. And if you forget the past, you just won't know how to fight the fascists in the present.
Yeah.
If you have a conscience, it's unbearable to be plugged into the corporate media machine right now. These outlets are accomplices in genocide, running cover for the war machine. Breakthrough has become the go-to outlet for those who want something different. But the funds we've used to start this platform are starting to run out. We'd never dream of turning to mainstream corporate funding. So we're turning to you. Become a patron. For as little as $5 a month, you can become an essential part of our fight to not just break through the mainstream media, but create something that can challenge it. We have to become completely viewer supported, or this platform we've built could go away. Don't just watch us, join us.
I want to ask you, I want to turn a little bit to Lebanon.
Let's do it. You know, it's our favorite thing.
So much to say here. Oh my God. So we've now had, I want to connect this to Lebanon because I feel like when we talk about that psychological war, I mean, Lebanon's always been through so much. I mean, the entire region has, but there's so much has happened in just the last, let's say 10 years, like between an economic collapse where like everybody lost their money. You had the Beirut port explosion. You've now had 2 devastating wars on Lebanon by the Israelis, but it's okay. It's a ceasefire now, apparently. That was just extended. I don't understand what that means because Lebanon appears to still being bombed, but I'm told there's a ceasefire there.
And I heard that it was like 2 years and like they have 2 years to I don't understand what the parameters of this quote unquote ceasefire is when you're still under active occupation by an enemy.
Yeah. But, and hey, whatever, I guess it's being bombed means ceasefire. I don't understand, but I'm just going to go with it. The Lebanese were patting themselves on the back. They were like, we got a 45-day extension. I'm like, extension of what?
Yeah.
But I guess this all goes into like the pressure that's on Lebanon right now, but has been to effectively capitulate politically to the Israelis and Americans while remaining under military threat, under occupation. And obviously, like we can talk about, and we have talked about, we can talk about it again because they're horrible, that element of the Lebanese political class that is invested in essentially handing over the country, these sort of like post-colonial elites. We'll get to that. But I want to focus for a moment on what I think are a lot of people who might be like going to the side of like, let's just capitulate and surrender, because I think that is also a part of the psychological war on the Lebanese, in addition to the actual physical war on them, to exhaust them and to
Yes.
make them feel that resistance is totally futile. There is no point. Israel's going to win. They are winning. It's their time.
Yep.
Just give up. Just
Yes.
give up so we can be normal. And
Yes.
so I'm just curious, how do you understand what's happening psychologically in Lebanon right now?
I mean, that's a beautiful example of a psychic intrusion. And the psychic intrusion is one that it's not like the content of what you're saying. It's a process that invokes an action inside of us. It rewires the topography of our internal world. That's the point. If it's expansionist and if it's meant to settle inside of us, I'm using these words on purpose because that's the sort of intent of imperialism, colonial, every expansionist project. It's also meant to rewire and invoke an action in you, right? And so it's the belief, and it makes you believe in a history that hasn't happened yet. And that means it stops you in your tracks. What you just said, khalas, Israel has won already, everything. It hasn't. Yeah. And I'm not saying that again. These can sound like platitudes or like somehow like, well, that's simplistic, Lara. It's like, yes, and also this is the entry point. This is the contact point of psychological operations. It's in that moment where you allow or like entertain the idea that they have won when materially that has not happened. That's the piece I want to say. Materially, that has not happened. Is there the threat? Is there? Yes, of course, there always has been. That's what a settler colonial entity does. It makes you believe that there's nothing else you can do. But in reality, that has not happened. And yet when that point of contact of the psychic intrusion is the time when we entertain it, right? That's how it makes its entry into our psyche. And then it settles when then we act as though it has already happened, right? And everything else gets rewired. And that's why I'm like, sometimes we think material concessions happen first and then psychologically you fall prey to it. And my sense in studying all this is it actually happens psychically first, which ushers in the possibility of all the other material concessions to happen because they need us to be conscripted into the belief that they have already won for everything else to become possible. And it's playing, and I'm not saying that there aren't other things happening at the same time. This is what asymmetric warfare is. When you have actual destruction happening, it's much easier to do, but that's why they need that. If this were so easy, they could just show up and be like, hello, we are your saviors, let us in. It's like, it doesn't really work like that. You need to pummel a population. You need to activate sectarian animosity. You need to destroy infrastructure. You need to squeeze people and make them feel like they are dying, just like in Cuba we're seeing. You need to make them believe that the people who are fighting for their sovereignty actually are not. You need to do all these things, and you need to do them repetitively and over and over and over and over again, which tells us something. Number one, this is not an easy thing. The fight over your mind is actually not an easy one. That's why I don't want people to be nihilistic. If it were easy, right? They wouldn't have to keep doing this. They wouldn't have to up the ante. They don't have to keep doing all this sort of stuff. They don't have to repeat their violence over and over again. Then it would just be like one and done. I'm just going to, do this to you. You're going to believe it. And then we move on. But that's never actually what happens. But here's the other thing is like all these promises to break, you said in Lebanon, it's like people are getting despairing and they're just like, khalas, like, let me just give up and maybe this will work. It never works. It's a lie every single time. And in our region, we do not have to reach very far to see that. Now, here's the particularity of Lebanon that I think we have to be very careful about, is that this is happening in tandem with a, let's say, century-plus long project of making Lebanon and Lebanese people think that they are superior, that there's something special to them, which I'm
sorry. Are you telling me that we're not? What?
Perhaps us divesting from that.
No, sorry, continue.
No, you're true. It's true though, right? Is closing that door to that belief is not just like you and I can laugh, and we should, because we get to, because we know what this means and what it looks like on an everyday basis. But closing that door is actually closing one entry point, is putting a barricade up against the psychic intrusion that allows the rest of it to happen. Because here's the thing, the belief, even the entertainment that this could look different in Lebanon. Why would it look different than Iraq? Why would it look different than Yemen? Why would it look different than Libya?
Because we're Phoenician, Lara.
Exactly. That's the shit they rely on. But this is the other thing I want to say, is that this has been a long-term project. It's been and that's why we can't disrupt it. It is not pedantic for us to say, localize this, historicize this, recognize it, and don't disconnect from the struggles that have been going on for ages, because creating timestamps that are separate from everything else in the region and also in the fights we've fought historically is one way that they sequester you and they get you to believe this is just a one moment in time, which also by the way means we have to start all over again. And that's big. That feels so big. That's what's despairing, is that every time you feel like, oh, fuck, I have to start this again. But like, I wish that Lebanese people would use the myth of the phoenix towards this end. Like,
right.
People, you got this down. Just like let it go in the direction of your animosity towards your oppressor and your enemy, not towards, can I go and like stay up until 7 a.m. partying because that's how we show that we're, resilient people.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you about the other element of that I mentioned earlier, which is, and you can, I know you love to throw in Fanon, so this is a good place to, is that post-colonial elite, right? That reproduces these colonial structures after, formal independence. And I put independence in big quotes. Do you think that framework helps explain why some of the political dynamics we see in Lebanon exist today, especially with regard of that capitulation to the Israelis? Because, this class, and then you also mentioned sectarianism, and there's that weaponization of sectarianism to fragment. I mean, all societies, it's the classic divide and conquer, and it really does undermine collective resistance to the point where in Lebanon, like the war, even as Israel bombs all of our infrastructure, it's still seen as a war on the Shia. And yes, there is an element of it that's like very much targeting Shia, but this is a war on all of Lebanon.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, what you just said is actually really important, is there is a demographic that is being used as a receptacle for everything. But that demographic also is becomes symbolic of a larger project that's not neutral or innocent about why that demographic is the one that got mobilized in that way, right? So, anti-Shia racism, all the sorts of stuff that comes with that. So even sectarianism is not an innocent project. But here's the thing where Fanon, you were saying, is like, not only did he warn us about the native elites, and he warned us about the native elites, not because somehow in their essence, indigenous people are so backwards, like they talk about, quote unquote, African leaders are so corrupt and our people are so corrupt. It's like, no, they're called class interests, because Fanon was a Marxist. And he was just like, this is why, because there are class interests that are involved. And if we're not careful about looking at the structure that was created here, and if we then individualize it, and then this is the part where I think in the United States gets captured by DEI and stuff like this, if we're just relying on identity shit, we miss all the pieces. Because here we are, we have instead of a colonial leader, we now have somebody who's from this place, looks like us, does that. But what are we missing in terms of what these people's interests are and their willingness to actually mobilize the same mechanics, domination, exploitation, extraction? That's what, if we talk about decolonial or anti-colonial work, it's about disrupting the machinery or the conditions that create the possibility for exploitation, domination, and extraction. And so if you see who gets magically replaced, you're just like, wait a second, you people are functioning on the same track because you have the same interests. But what conscripts us is they look differently. They're sold to us in a particular way. They sell themselves in a particular way, which is why telling the story of our corrupt warlord leaders is like, you all mobilize sectarianism whenever you want, and then you go have dinner with yourselves. You all share the same banking system. You all own the same shit. Clearly, sectarianism is not that all empowering, all encompassing and scary that you don't know how to manage this. So I think that is where Fanon does help us. Now, it's very important to say there are specificities of places that are different than others, right? Like Lebanon's particularities, even with colonialism, is very different than, let's say, than other nations or post-colonial nations. Of
course, yeah.
And that's actually really important, but the logics are the same.
Yeah.
The logic that repeats itself is the same.
Well, it's also like, okay, like I love the idea of, there's really a rainbow coalition of political corrupt elites in Lebanon.
Yes.
Because I mean, they all there's a guy right now, Fouad Makhzoumi, who is a billionaire. He's a billionaire. He's a Sunni politician and I just mentioned Sunni because he's trying to be the new Sunni representative in Lebanon. And he's constantly holding, he recently held some meeting at a really fancy hotel in Beirut of all these Sunni MPs to come together and talk about why it's so important to not just to normalize with Israel. And one of the first steps to doing that is to get rid of the boycott law. This law that makes it illegal for Lebanese to basically have discourse with Israelis because these countries are technically at war. And there's these Lebanese politicians like him who are pushing the Trump administration to actually undo this law. They see that as some sort of stepping stone to making Lebanon and Israel have normalizing peace arrangement in the future. But there's people like him. There's people like Riyad Salami, who was the head of the central bank, a Christian guy, who and again, these people are all friends, and there's a neoliberal order to how they function.
Yes.
And there's even Shias. Shias in Lebanon aren't all perfect and beautiful and resisting. There's Shias in Lebanon too, who are a part of an elite political class. There's also some Shias outside of Lebanon who
you talked about one of them on the show.
Ones. Right. And these people all have very material interests in being in bed with empire. And yes, I mean, it's this isn't a corruption that's in the DNA of Lebanese. It's actually a problem we have all across the third world because of the neoliberal arrangements that were enforced on these countries in the post-colonial order, largely through the World Bank and IMF. And they manifest in different ways. In Lebanon, it's religious sectarianism because of the way the system is set up. In other parts of the global south, it's tribal differences in areas, or language differences in areas that weren't even countries. They were forced to be countries because of borders that were drawn by the British and the French. And, it just goes on and on and on. And that divide and conquer works so well, but it hasn't worked well enough because I love what you were saying earlier too. It's if it was easy, there would not be a $1.5 trillion investment in the military of the United States of America if it was that easy to subjugate the world.
Yes, that's still failing in terms of their own aims. It's still failing. You were in Afghanistan and Iraq for 20 plus years. You lost. You fucking lost, right? Yeah. Now you destroyed a lot.
Yes.
And that's, I think, the hard contradiction. Sometimes people are just but Lara, it's so hard to come to terms.
We're not saying anybody won. We're not saying Afghanistan came out a winner.
Right.
But the Americans losing it matters. That matters.
Exactly. It matters in as much as it blows up in the face of the insistence that you all will lose just because we exist. And that story matters for us to say, no, actually, that's not the case. And it also matters to say that just because they have tried to eliminate every element of resistance and self-determination and insistence that a people have the right to live in dignity and in the ways that they determine they want to live, that also failed.
Yeah.
That also failed.
And the dignity aspect matters. I think that's taken for granted, by people who are comfortable. It's just what's the point of fighting if I'm going to get everything taken away from me? And it's well, there's people in this world that have already had everything taken away from them.
And have always lived in this world alongside you.
Yes. And even there's also people who do have things, but also they don't want to be slaves. And that's something that Nasrallah would say. Nasrallah would make this point about we aren't slaves. You can either, your options are to be a slave to America, to Israel, to like these oppressive powers, and have no dignity whatsoever, or to resist. And we choose to resist in dignity. And I mean, that there's something to that. There's also the fact that like, this is probably a part of that psychological warfare as well, is this belief that not only has there never been any different way, that your only option is to like resist and die, or to like stop resisting and then you can be comfortable. But you look at a lot of countries that have been subjugated and they're not comfortable. They don't have electricity either.
No. And they don't have electricity. They don't have any infrastructure they were promised. That's what I mean by it's a lie. And we need to say that up front, like it is a lie. There is nothing good that can come out of American imperialism. Here's the other thing you were saying, and I think this is part of the psyops, the psychic intrusions, whatever we want to call them, is that in that configuration, death is the worst thing that can happen to you. And this is a hard one for people. And I'm not downplaying the tremendous loss that people have to deal with, right? But I think when you are under the boot of oppressive forces, there's a different relationship to life and death, because the oppressor intends to own everything about the conditions of your life and also everything about the conditions of your death. In the Zionist entity, we have examples of this. That's why they hold on to corpses and keep them even after death, because it's not enough that I killed you. Now I need to own your corpse and deny your family the ability to engage in proper rituals and all this sort of stuff, which again is about dismembering. I mean, Nadira Shalhoub-Kavrikyan talks about this, right? Is about dismembering the social and political fabric of societies. But I really want folks, like, and I think this is what a militant knows, is like, liberation is always imminent, but so is death. And death is not the worst thing that can come, because you also understand that what we're fighting for is bigger than this moment. And that image of like, and I think this is like Ghassan Kanafani's most famous interview, which I do like lay out in the book, in the final chapter about psychic militancy, I unpack it. Richard Carlton says, but isn't it better than to die? And Ghassan Kanafani says, I'm paraphrasing here, says something like, for you, maybe. But for us, dignity and fighting for freedom is as essential as life itself. And there's something so profound about that saying. This is not an abstraction. This is about a commitment to a cause that's larger, and one that understands that even if you die in the moment, the political commitment to the surety that this can't be the only way that the world is configured is far more important.
And I think on that, I want to ask you about revolutionary optimism, which, there's so much of when it comes to your book and the work that you do. What does revolutionary optimism actually mean? Because, I think some people might hear that and think, oh, like that just sounds like naive. Or like blind hope or something. And that's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah. And I think this is why sometimes I shy away. Obviously, it comes from a particular political tradition. That's an actual word, a phrase. That's not my invention. That's not your invention, right? But I do sometimes shy away from using the word optimism precisely for that trap that you're talking about, that people think, oh, this is a delusion, or I have to like be optimistic in instances in which, everything in front of me tells me I shouldn't be. I think for me, the most important thing is to recognize that anytime we have an affect of despair, is to question what that is stabilizing and for who that feeling is. And in that feeling, who do we disconnect from and give up on? And that for me is the optimism piece. It's the belief, the core belief, that not only is liberation possible, but that people, might not be you, and that's okay, but people the world over are working towards this end every single day in this moment right now. So in that moment of despair where you let go of revolutionary optimism, you are also disconnecting and disidentifying with those people who are putting their body on the line and committing to that. That's on one level. On the other hand, this is the psychic surrender. This is the ceding of psychic space, is that the point is to let go of even the possibility that our future could look different. That future hasn't happened yet, but the demand is give that up. You're not only allowed, this is back to Fanon, I'm not here, colonialism is not here only to fuck up your present and steal everything from you and extract from you. He tells us also it goes into the past, it reworks it, makes you a loser from the start. These are his words, and projects into the future. So you can't even imagine a different future, right? That for me is like, if we're going to think about anything that's revolutionary optimism, it's about fighting us succumbing to that reality rather than ours. It's our reality. It's our commitments. It's our certainty that another way is possible. We might not know what that way is, by the way. Let me just say that up front. But that's the point. There's one place that's locking you in and saying, this is how it will be. There's another place that says, there are possibilities here. And those possibilities are always in emergence. And this is what I'm committing to. But one thing I will not commit to is that version. And as that version belongs to the oppressor, not me.
Right. You know, I don't want to like sit here and like romanticize the Soviet Union or you know, like there was like nice aspects of it and then there was not so nice aspects of it, but it did offer an alternative during the Cold War in the sense that there were other countries that had an alternative way of existing, and that was one of the biggest necessities of like destroying communism or socialism anywhere it existed. It's one of the reasons Cuba, the US is so insistent on destroying this tiny island nation. There's a lot of reasons why, but one of them is you cannot have an example of a different way to live that works, right?
Yes.
Or that has nice aspects to it that challenge capitalism. And I think one thing that, and I mean, I don't expect you to have an answer to this, it's just kind of an observation, but I think one of our big struggles today is that there isn't like capitalism versus. It's like American hegemony trying to dominate everything. And there is like a lack of imagination about what else could be, because it's not the same kind of ideological fight that it used to be. And that I think presents a really big challenge. Because then we're kind of forced to like imagine, but then how can you imagine and formulate a different like alternative world? I mean, we still have socialism, right? We can still like use that as a blueprint, but it's like become this abstract thing because it really sucks.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, but it also just maybe presents opportunities too, because then there is space to imagine. But it's like people have to, you know, open their minds up a bit and not be boxed in by the, you know, this idea that there is nothing else and there is no other way.
Yes. It does present an opportunity, but here's the other thing is if there is a lack of imagination, it's because that is a political project too.
Yeah.
Right. So this is what why I keep coming back to it. And we need to keep repeating these things. It's like, this does not happen by accident. This is not accidental. This is not a personal failure of people's. This is not even a personal failure of larger movements. There's a political project to conscript us into a closing down of imagination. And at the same time, that's why Tawafan al-Aqsa has garnered so much psychic energy around the world. Because that was, it broke through that and said, there is an imagination. Let me show you. Let me show you what that means. And that imagination was not just abstract. It was a knowledge that I'm going to alchemize this and create a portal that will get me to the other side. That can't happen if psychologically you don't have imagination of a different world.
Right.
And this is why so many people are rallying around it. I was on my dear friend and comrade Jared Ware's show earlier today, Millennials Looking at Capitalism, and we were going through a counterinsurgency manual because we're dorks and that's what we do. But one other thing that Tawafan al-Aqsa did is then have people, not only does it create a possibility in the moment, but it has people actually go back and revisit times in which they might have been despairing or saw something a different way and then get to rework it, because that's also what imagination, what possibilities create, right?
Yeah.
But here's the other thing is like, there also is a political and social currency to just refusing. That even if we don't know this is what we're always tasked with. And you know this type, this cynical type of like, well, tell me how you'd like the world to look. Okay, well, that's what I'm fighting for. Like, I'm not sure what that's going to look. What I know is that this version of the world can't be it.
Yeah. At the very least, like, that's the baseline.
It can't
this
be
can't
it.
be it. Yeah, this
And
can't
it can't be it because it is fundamentally conditioned on the suffering of the most vulnerable among us. That's why it can't be it. Not just, oh, I live a tragic life. It's like, no, this actually entire setup is built on the subjugation of people in a supremacist hierarchy. That can't be it. What is to come is one that emerges through struggle. It emerges through working out contradictions in real time. It emerges through the shifting terrain, which, by the way, in the world we live in now, like you were alluding to, is very different than it was 50, 60, 70, 80 years. Like, the shifting terrain is so much, people are constantly adapting. Our job, I think this is the psychic militancy piece that I talk about in the book, is always knowing we can tap into that. We can tap into it cannot be that it's ossified. Anytime we feel like possibilities are ossified, it's a clue to us that a psychic intrusion by power is happening, because only power relies on being on stasis, on a static process, which is just like what capitalism is, always expanding inorganically, but somehow we don't have possibilities. How does that, like, that contradiction also doesn't work. So I think even refusals mean something. In the book, I use a quote from Leanne Simpson. I love this quote. In her book, she just says, what we've always done is the book. She says, what if no one sided with colonialism? And it's
so amazing.
Right? But it's a provocation. It sounds so like simple, but it is an invitation and a provocation and a challenge and a political demand of what that means at every turn. What does it mean at every turn? To consciously, not unconsciously, and that's the other thing I say in the book, is none of this shit's unconscious. This is a political project. It's a political commitment. If their project of intrusion is a political one, ours has to be as well. And it's every day committing to not siding with colonialism, not siding with the mechanics of it, not siding with what it means, not siding with what it conscriptions, the identifications it pulls us into. And I don't pretend to say this is easy or I have the answers of how to do it, but we have refusals and provocations and examples, and to rally that does create the possibilities. I'm not sure what it's going to look like even tomorrow, 1 week from now. I mean, look at this past year. How the fuck let alone the last 3 years.
You don't have a crystal ball? Then what the hell are we doing here?
No, let alone the last 3 years. But what I do know is that conditions of suffering create resistance. And that means there are possibilities. And anytime we feel a shutting down of that, it's a clue. Something is playing on me and through me. This is Sarah Ahmed's words. Like, power needs on us and through us to work. And if we can remain connected to that, that channel, we can also barricade that channel.
I do. First of all, I want to remind everybody, because there's a few things I want to ask you about that are tangentially related to your book, but I want to remind everybody that when they're watching this, it will be out for purchase. From the Clinic to the Streets, Psychoanalysis for Revolutionary Futures. Where can people buy your book?
Pluto Press, who I love. They're amazing, right? They're still out there letting us write the work that we need to write and not bending our politics. So they're amazing. And then most local bookstores, if it's not in your local bookstore, ask them to, so we don't have to rely on Amazon, even though I know some people have to. But I think it's available. And I just actually did the audio version of it, the audiobook version of it. So that will be coming out soon.
I think I saw you post from a sound studio. God,
sound booth.
Use the word. Thank you. A sound booth, right. Which is very cool. So it's going to be your voice on the audiobook.
Yes.
People can have it read to them by you. That's actually really cool.
Yeah.
It's not going to be some British person.
No, exactly. Or some person, like, that's what I had to fight really hard for this one, but I was just like, I need to read these words.
But no, it's really timely. And I want to ask you, because I just had the opportunity to skim through a bit, and I'm very excited to sit down and read it properly, but not trying to make this like a, selfish thing, but I think everybody is really exhausted. And so I feel like a book like this is very much almost like therapeutic to be able to read. So I'm curious, writing it yourself, did it change how you see anything? Was it like, God, I'm going to sound so new agey, but was it healing for you?
Yes. I love this question, actually. It was a practice in precisely what I'm saying in the book. It's a practice of remaining focused. It's a practice of repeating. It's a practice of, as we do that, to find out, woo, this shit is causing something in me. Like, why do I feel self-conscious about repeating something and it feels like a platitude or a simplistic thing, like power is out to control us? And that can feel so ridiculous. And we're just like, everybody knows that. And then it was a reminder as I was distilling this and repeating to myself, just as much as I was repeating to the comrades who will read this. That's the part that was important, is actually an in vivo process of going through this and realizing that actually in the face of oppression, there's nothing that is simple to repeat. That's the point. Their attacks on our mind, on our souls, on our interiority are ferocious, unbending, and never ending. So our responses to it have to be that too. So it was a practice of that. I'm like, everything I'm saying to do, and by the way, it's not like it's not a self-help. The best compliment I got was a comrade reading. Actually, it was Nick Estes, who's like, it's not self-helpy, and Jared Ware as well. He was like, this is not a self-help book. That's the best compliment I got, because it's the last fucking thing that I wanted to be. But what it is more like an expose, and it's one that tracks the logic and also one that implicates the psychology fields and psychoanalysis in particular as being involved in state projects of psychic intrusion and control and management of people's interior worlds. And, we don't have to look far. I mean, they've done that over and over and over again. There are consulting psychoanalysts that are consulting about the genocide in Palestine right now, right, that consult with how to make it a better genocide. There were psychologists that were involved in Abu Ghraib. Mm-hmm. There were psychologists that were involved in torture in Guantanamo Bay. There are psychoanalysts that are right now involved in writing all the anti-trans bills that are happening right now in the United States. So like, this is, even though psychology and psychoanalysis particularly, which is the field I was trained in, that's why I write about it, even though outwardly it presents itself as a neutral field and a helping field and all these sorts of things, it is simultaneously involved in all these projects. And I track that, including Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays.
Yes.
Who is the father of propaganda and cashed in on the legacy of Freud to say, listen to me. And people did listen to him. And then, the overthrow of leftist governments in Guatemala was because of him, right? So there's this long sordid history. And for me, I'm just like, let's despecialize this knowledge, because they're lying. They're saying we're not, this belongs in the clinic only. This is the only place you can do. It needs to be individual. And yet they're using it in these ways. So I'm just like, listen, seize this shit, use it as one of many tools. I'm not saying this is the only thing, but this is one of many tools, because we have to know.
The Department of War is uses this to literally to get the population to support imperialism.
Absolutely. And the last thing I'll say about this is one of the interesting things, because again, the book, it's not meant to be a comprehensive overview of psychological operations. I don't pretend to do that. That's not the point of the book. But one of the things I did do is spend a lot of time with counterinsurgency manuals and reading this shit. And they are very clear about one thing, which is what I want folks to kind of get, why I felt an urgency to write this and sort of put it in this way, is that consistently across manuals, what they say is militants are the hardest people to reach because they have a cause that's bigger, because they're unbending. Don't waste your time trying to change the minds of militants. What you do instead is make people hate them, make people distrust them, make people think that if the militant was gone, their life would be better. Back to Lebanon, right? If only this didn't exist.
Only Hezbollah was gone.
Everything would be better. Misinformation campaigns, making people suffering tied into that, or straight out threatening them. If you don't side with us, there's a gun to the head of your kid. None of this is you wouldn't need to you wouldn't need to do all of that if this work was easy, which is what the reminder to us is to be militant. When I say to be psychically militant, It is a practice. It's a daily practice of consciousness about all the political aspects involved in the capture of our mind. And to remember that they have to put the effort in. So we can too. It's not a done deal.
I'm like watching you speak and I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh, that would be a good social media clip. Oh, no, wait, that would be a good. I'm just going to have to clip every 2 minutes of this and put it on Instagram because so actually to be a little bit like, I guess, to end on like a few, I don't want to say fun notes, but also maybe we'll throw this behind a paywall depending on where we go, this ending part here. I just kind of want to ask you a few like less serious, but still serious questions because you are in the field of psychoanalysis and you've just broken down how important it is to understand how this is being used against us. Yeah. In really, really big and dramatic ways that impact like the US's ability to like destroy the world. But there's also these kinds of small ways that, and maybe this can just be more of like a shit talking session in a way. But
My favorite.
I want to ask you a bit about like the sort of wellness trends because if you enjoyed this episode and want to hear the rest, you can access it by becoming a Breakthrough News member at patreon.com/breakthrough news.